Of this singular being, many anecdotes were prevalent among the seafaring men of Nantucket. These anecdotes went to prove his prodigious strength when under excitement, but some of them giving rise to a doubt of his sanity. But on board the Krampus, it seems he was regarded at a time of the mutiny with feelings more of derision than of anything else. I have been thus particular in speaking of Dirk Peters because ferocious as he appeared, he proved the main instrument in preserving the life of Augustus. And because I shall have frequent occasion to mention him hereafter in the course of my narrative, a narrative, let me here say, which in its later portions will be found to include incidents of a nature so entirely out of the range of human experience, and for this reason so far beyond the limits of human credulity. That I proceed in utter hopelessness of obtaining credence for all that I shall tell. Yet confidently, trusting in time and progressing science to verify some of the most important and most improbable of my statements. After much indecision or 2 or 3 violent quarrels, it was determined at last that all of the prisoners, with the exception of Augustus, whom Peters insisted on jocular manner upon keeping as his clerk, should be set adrift in one of the smallest whaleboats. The mate went down in the cabin to see if Captain Barnard was still living, for it will be remembered he was left below when the mutineers came up. Presently the two made their appearance, and the captain, pale as death, but somewhat recovered from the effects of his wound. He spoke to the men in a voice hardly articulate, and treated them not to set him adrift, but to return to their duty, and promising to land them wherever they chose, and they to take no steps for bringing them to justice. He might as well have spoken to the winds. Two of the ruffians seized him by the arms and hurled him over the great side of the boat, which had been lowered while the mate went below. The 2 men were lying on the deck were then untied and ordered to follow, which they did without attempting any resistance, Augustus being still left in his painful position, although he struggled and prayed only for the poor satisfaction of being permitted to bid his father farewell. A handful of sea biscuit and a jug of water were now handed down, but neither mast, sail, oar, nor compass. The boat was towed astern for a few minutes, during which the mutineers held another consultation. It was then finally cut adrift. By this time night had come on, but neither were there moon nor stars visible. And a short, ugly sea was running, although there was no great deal of wind. The boat was instantly out of sight, and little hope could be entertained for the unfortunate sufferers who were in it. This event happened, however, in latitude 35 degrees by 30 north, longitude 60 degrees by 20 west, and consequently at no very great distance from the Bermuda Islands. Augustus therefore endeavored to console himself with the idea that the boat might either succeed in reaching the land or come sufficiently near it to be followed with the vessels off the coast. All sail was now put upon the brig, and she continued her original course to the southwest, the mutineers being bent upon some piratical expedition, in which, from there all that could be understood, a ship was to be intercepted on her way from the Cape Verde Islands to Puerto Rico. No attention was paid to Augustus, who was untied, and suffered to go about anywhere forward of the cabin companionway. Dirk Peters treated him with some degree of kindness, and on one occasion saved him from the brutality of the cook. The situation was still one of the most precarious, as the men were continually intoxicated, and there was no relying upon the continued good humor or carelessness in regard to himself. His anxiety, on my account, he represented, however, as the most distressing result of his condition. And indeed, I had never reason to doubt the sincerity of his friendship. More than once he had resolved to acquaint the mutineers with the secret of my being on board, but was restrained from doing, and partly through recollection of the atrocities he had already beheld, and partly through a hope of being able to watch me soon bring me relief. For the latter purpose, he was constantly on the watch, but in spite of the most constant vigilance, 3 days elapsed after the boat was cut adrift before any chance occurred. At length, on the night of the third day, there came on a heavy blow from the eastward, and all hands were called up to take in the sail. During the confusion which ensued, he made his way, being unobserved, below, and into the stateroom. What was his grief and horror in discovering that the latter had been rendered a place of deposit for a variety of sea stores, and ship furniture, and that several fathoms of old chain cable, which had been stowed away beneath the companion ladder, had been dragged thence to make room for a chest, and were now lying immediately upon the trap. To remove it without discovery was now impossible, and he returned on deck as quickly as he could. As he came up, the mate seized him by the throat and demanding what he had been doing in the cabin, was about flinging him over the larboard bulwark, when his life was again preserved through the interference of Dirk Peters. Augustus was now put in handcuffs, of which there were several pairs on board, and his feet lashed tightly together. He was then taken to the steerage and thrown into a lower berth next to the forecastle bulkheads, with the assurance that he should never put his foot on deck again, quote, until the brig was no longer a brig, unquote. This was the expression of the cook who threw him into the berth. It was hardly possible to say what precise meaning was intended by the phrase. The whole affair, however, proved the ultimate means of my relief, as will presently appear. For some minutes after the cook had left the forecastle, Augustus abandoned himself to despair, never hoping to leave the berth alive. He now came to the resolution of acquainting the first of the men who should come down with my situation, thinking it better to let me take the chance with the mutineers than perish of thirst in the hold. For it had been 10 days since I was first impression, and my jug of water was not a plentiful supply even for 4. As he was thinking on the subject, the idea came all at once into his head that it might be possible to communicate with me by way of the main hold. In any other circumstances, the difficulty and hazard of the undertaking would have prevented him from attempting it, but now he had, at all events, little prospect of life, and consequently little to lose. He bent his whole mind, therefore, upon the task. His handcuffs were the first consideration. At first he saw no method of removing them, and feared that he should be thus baffled in the very outset. But upon a closer scrutiny, he discovered that the irons could be slipped off and on at pleasure, with very little effort or inconvenience, by barely squeezing his hands through them. This species of manacle being altogether ineffectual in confining young persons, in whom the smaller bones yield to pressure. He now untied his feet and, leaving the cord in such a manner that she could be easily readjusted in the event of any person's coming down, proceeded to examine the bulkhead where it joined with the berth. The partition here was of soft pine board, an inch thick, and he saw that he should have little trouble in cutting his way through. A voice was now heard at the forecastle companionway, and he had just time to put his right hand into the handcuff. The left had not been removed, and to draw the rope into a slip knot around his ankle. When Dirk Peters came below, followed by Tiger, who immediately leaped into the berth and lay down. The dog had been brought aboard by Augustus, who knew my attachment to an animal, and thought it would give me pleasure to have him with me during the voyage. He went up to our house for him immediately after first taking me into the hold. We did not think of mentioning the circumstance upon his bringing the watch. Since the mutiny, Augustus had not seen him before his appearance with Dirk Peters, and had given him up for lost, supposing him to have been thrown overboard by some of the malignant villains belonging to the mate's gang. It appeared afterward that he crawled into a hole beneath the whaleboat, from which, not having room to turn around, he could extricate himself. Peters at last let him out, and with a species of good feeling with which my friend knew him well how to appreciate, I brought him to him in the forecastle as a companion, leaving at the same time some salt chunk and potatoes with a can of water, and then he went on deck, promising to come down with something to eat more on the next day. When he had gone, Augustus freed both hands from the manacles and unfastened his feet. He then turned to the head of the mattress on which he had been lying, and with his penknife, for the ruffians had not thought it worthwhile to search him, commenced cutting vigorously across one of the partition planks, and as close as least possible to the floor of the berth. He chose to cut here because, if suddenly interrupted, he would be able to conceal what had been done by letting the head of the mattress fall into its proper position. For the remainder of the day, however, no disturbance occurred, and by night he had completely divided the plank. It should be here observed that none of the crew occupied the forecastle as a sleeping place, living all together in the cabin since the mutiny, drinking the wines and feasting on the sea stores of Captain Barnard, and giving no more heed that was absolutely necessary to the navigation of the brig. These circumstances proved fortunate for both for myself and Augustus, for had matters been otherwise, he would have found it nearly impossible to reach me. As it was, he proceeded with confidence in his design. It was near daybreak, however, before he completed the second division of the board, which was about a foot above the first cut, thus making an aperture quite large enough to admit his passage through with facility to the main orlop deck. Having got here, he made his way, with but little trouble, to the lower main hatch, although in so doing he had to scramble over tiers of oil casks piled nearly as high as the upper deck, there being barely room enough left for his body. Upon reaching the hatch, he found Tiger had followed him below, squeezing between two rows of the casks. It was not too late, however, to attempt getting to me before dawn, as the chief difficulty lay in passing through the close stowage in the lower hold. He therefore resolved to return and wait until the next night. With this design, he proceeded to loosen the hatch so that he might have as little detention as possible when he should come again. No sooner had he loosened it than Tiger sprang eagerly to the small opening produced, snuffed for a moment, and then uttered a long whine, scratching at the same time. as if anxious to remove the covering with his paws.